Imagine dedicating your entire life to helping others, being recognized as a pillar of kindness and generosity in your community, and suddenly, one ordinary morning, discovering that all that legacy could be destroyed by a false accusation. It seems impossible, doesn't it? But that's exactly what happened to Clarisse Monroe, a woman whose strength and faith inspired generations, only to see her world turned upside down. How could someone who spent a lifetime helping others be treated as a criminal by the system that was supposed to protect her? Clarisse Monroe was born in a small town in the United States, in a neighborhood marked by economic hardship and limited opportunities. From a young age, she learned the importance of hard work. Her mother, a determined and religious woman, always said, "Daughter, no matter what life throws at you, there's always a hand to lend, even if it has to be yours." These words shaped Clarisse's essence. She grew up helping neighbors, caring for younger siblings, and offering companionship to lonely, elderly people. Even amidst adverse conditions, Clarisse found beauty in the little things: a child's smile, the smell of freshly baked bread, the feeling of planting something that would bloom months later. These simple moments became pillars of her life and the character she so painstakingly built. Throughout her life, Clarisse became known for her unwavering commitment to the community. Local organizations sought her advice. Residents sought her out when they needed help, and even those who barely knew her recognized her kindness. She didn't just say it. Her actions spoke louder. Her kitchen was always full of children in need, and anyone who crossed her path could count on a helping hand, a warm meal, or a comforting hug. The turning point in this story, however, didn't begin with the injustice that put her behind bars, but with a cold, silent night, 25 years before the trial that would unjustly convict her. It was a night when the wind bit her skin and the streetlights barely illuminated the deserted streets. Clarisse was walking home after helping with a charity project when she heard small moans coming from behind a dumpster. Curious and worried, she approached slowly. 3 children huddled together, their clothes torn, their eyes watering with fear. Liam, Emily, and Ethan Caldwell had faces marked by abandonment, hunger, and cold. Their bodies trembled, but there was something in their eyes that touched Clarisse deeply, a silent plea for hope. She crouched down, speaking softly, offering words of comfort. Her every gesture conveyed safety, warmth, and the promise of care. Without hesitation, Clarisse decided to take them home. She knew she didn't have unlimited resources, that she could barely take care of herself, but something inside her told her she couldn't ignore those faces. This act of compassion would be the cornerstone of her entire life, shaping not only the children's future but also her own. Clarisse not only welcomed Liam, Emily, and Ethan, but also shaped their lives with discipline, love, and solid values. She taught them responsibility, empathy, courage, and perseverance. Every meal shared, every bedside conversation, every bedtime story was a lesson they would carry forever. What makes Clarisse truly remarkable is how she balanced her personal life with community commitment. While caring for the Caldwells, she also worked long hours to ensure their home had every comfort. She attended community meetings, organized fundraisers, and was always ready to intervene when injustices occurred around her. Clarisse was a moral compass for many, but even she could not have foreseen that this same kindness would be used against her years later. As Clarisse watched the children grow, she saw small miracles unfold before her eyes. Liam developed an insatiable curiosity for knowledge. Emily displayed a fierce determination to overcome any obstacle, and Ethan, silent but perceptive, absorbed each lesson intently. Clarisse knew she couldn't protect them from all the dangers in the world, but she also understood that she had sown something that no judgment or unfair system could erase: character, courage, and humanity. Even amidst her happiness and fulfillment, Clarisse felt the weight of uncertainty. At times, she wondered if her decision to take in these children would have future consequences. small signs of injustice, spiteful comments from envious neighbors, and unfounded suspicions began to surface. She tried to ignore them, but there was a growing sense that something was coming, something that could test not only her strength, but the very essence of her faith and humanity. All of this shows us that a person's true strength is measured not only by what they achieve, but by the impact they leave on the lives of others. Clarisse Monroe teaches us that acts of kindness have profound consequences, both positive and unexpected, and that justice does not always go hand in hand with morality. What matters in the end is the courage to do right, even when the world isn't watching. If you're inspired by stories of courage, kindness, and resilience, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single detail of this moving journey. Clarisse Monroe's story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss the next chapters. When Clarisse opened the door and saw the three small, frightened, dirty faces, she felt a mixture of compassion and fear. Each child seemed to carry within them all the pain of a world that had been so unfair to them. But in that moment, something changed. Clarisse realized she couldn't turn away. That simple moment would become the beginning of a story that would change not only the children's lives, but hers forever. How could a woman with limited resources transform the lives of three abandoned children? And more importantly, could she protect their hearts from the scars of the past? Entering her home with Liam, Emily, and Ethan, Clarisse felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Her home was modest, peeling walls, old furniture, and little food. But every corner carried the warmth of hope that Clarisse wanted to convey. She knew she couldn't offer luxury or riches, but she could offer something worth far more: love, discipline, and security. In the first few weeks, living together was challenging. The children were scared, traumatized by experiences of abandonment and violence. Liam, the oldest, struggled to trust. Emily, stubborn and suspicious, withdrew from any physical contact, and Ethan, silent, seemed to watch Clarisse's every gesture with suspicion. Clarisse's patience was tested daily, but she never backed down. She began with small routines, regular meals, bedtimes, simple chores, and a loving discipline that combined firmness and affection. Every achievement, no matter how small, was celebrated. She read stories at night, taught songs, and little by little, the Caldwells began to understand that their home could be safe. Time passed, and the relationship between Clarisse and the children strengthened. Liam began to open up, displaying a lively intelligence and insatiable curiosity. Emily, with Clarisse's constant support, learned to trust and became determined and courageous. Ethan, initially reserved, developed a critical and empathetic outlook on the world. Clarisse Monroe's home became a space for learning, growth, and love, something no institution could offer. In addition to caring for the children, Clarisse continued to be active in the community. She attended local meetings, helped neighbors in need, and gradually her reputation grew. People began to recognize her boundless kindness, bringing positive attention but also silent envy from some. Small rumors began to surface, questioning her intentions, but Clarisse ignored them, focused on protecting and educating the Caldwells. The defining moment of this group came on a rainy afternoon, when Liam, after a fight with other children at school, returned home defeated and with tears in his eyes. Clarisse took him in, explaining the importance of facing challenges with courage, but also with honesty and empathy. Emily and Ethan watched, absorbing every word. There, Clarisse realized she wasn't just providing physical shelter, she was shaping souls, giving the children the chance to grow into strong, resilient, and human beings. This book teaches us that, even with limited resources, an act of courage and love can transform lives. Clarisse Monroe demonstrates that protecting, educating, and nurturing are as powerful as any material wealth. More than raising children, she was raising future leaders, human beings capable of confronting the world's injustices with ethics and heart. Night fell over the city, and Clarisse Monroe's house was silent, except for the soft sounds of Liam turning the pages of a book, Emily tidying up her toys, and Ethan watching the rain through the window. Clarisse sat at the table, reflecting on the past few days and how each small step forward felt like a victory against a world that, until then, had offered them only pain. She knew that the love and patience she was investing now would be the foundation of their lives, but she also felt the weight of the responsibility she carried alone. As she prepared a simple meal for everyone, Clarisse remembered her own childhood, the hardships she had faced, the nights when she just longed for someone to hold her arm and tell her everything would be okay. Now she found herself in that position for the Caldwells, offering the very thing that had once been denied her. The feeling was overwhelming, but also empowering. Every smile that appeared on the children's faces confirmed that she was making a difference. Over the next few days, Clarisse implemented routines that balanced discipline and freedom. Liam studied for hours, but had time to explore his passions. Emily played sports and art, learning to express herself and trust her own abilities. Ethan, silent, began to share his thoughts and dreams, demonstrating a surprising maturity for his age. Clarisse watched with pride, but also with a hint of concern. She knew that life beyond would still be full of challenges and that their innocence would not last forever. She began to teach them more than just tasks and habits. She spoke about values, ethics, and courage. The world won't always be fair, Clarisse would say, but how we choose to act in the face of injustice will define who we are. Liam listened intently, pondering every word, while Emily and Ethan absorbed each lesson silently. These seemingly simple conversations planted seeds of inner strength that would blossom years later, when Clarisse herself would need to be saved by those she now protected. Meanwhile, in the community, Clarisse began to gain notoriety. Neighbor after neighbor, she became a beacon of kindness and leadership. But not everyone welcomed her success and dedication. Some began to spread malicious rumors, questioning her conduct and insinuating hidden agendas. Clarisse, though aware of the malice of others, remained steadfast. She knew that the truth of her actions spoke louder than any malicious comment. One afternoon, an incident further tested her patience. Liam, frustrated with the difficulty of a school assignment, tore up his notebook in a fit of rage. Clarisse approached, placed her hand on his shoulder, and said in a calm but firm voice, "I know you're angry, but the way we react to frustration shows who we truly are." Liam lowered his head, feeling the weight of responsibility and the importance of learning to manage one's feelings. Emily and Ethan watched, internalizing Clarisse's example. The routine remained challenging, but each obstacle strengthened the bond between Clarisse and the children. She taught them the importance of supporting each other, working together, and never abandoning those in need. These lessons, which seemed like small daily gestures, formed the foundation of a strong character that the Caldwells would carry with them into adulthood. At the end of each day, Clarisse sat in silence, reflecting on the steps she had taken and the challenges that lay ahead. She knew she couldn't control the future, but she could prepare those she loved to face it with courage, kindness, and resilience. Every laugh, every achievement, and every loving gesture from the children was a reminder that despite the difficulties, the choice to act with love and dedication would never be in vain. Each night before falling asleep, Clarisse would silently murmur a prayer, asking for strength and wisdom. She didn't know that these prayers were not just for her, but also for the Caldwells, that they might grow up with character and courage, and that one day those same values would return to protect her when she needed them most. And so life went on, weaving the beginning of a story that would transform not only the children's fate, but also that of Clarisse Monroe herself. The Caldwells' adolescence brought new challenges. Liam, now 13, began to question everything around him. The curiosity that had once been a strength now turned into restlessness and rebellion. Emily, at 12, became more determined, but also more sensitive to criticism and scorn from peers who didn't understand her past. Ethan, always observant, showed signs of precocious maturity, noticing nuances that even Clarisse missed. Clarisse realized she would need to adapt her educational approach. Strict discipline was no longer enough. Now dialogue, understanding, and increased patience were needed. Every school conflict, every adolescent frustration was an opportunity to teach resilience, ethics, and empathy. Liam often brought home small defeats and comparisons with more fortunate friends. Clarisse would sit with him and say, "What you have inside is worth more than any luxury the world can offer." Emily faced bullying due to her past. Clarisse not only defended her, but also taught her to transform pain into strength. Ethan, on the other hand, struggled with feelings of helplessness when he saw injustices he couldn't correct. Clarisse encouraged him to use his intelligence and observation to make a difference, showing that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. The daily routine became more structured. Intensive study, household chores, extracurricular activities, and time dedicated to personal reflection. Each child began to develop unique talents. Liam excelled in science and technology, Emily in literature and art, and Ethan in social analysis and leadership. Clarisse knew these talents would be vital in the future, not only for themselves but also for the impact they could have on the community. Despite her progress, the town's perception of Clarisse was beginning to change. Some neighbors who had once admired her now murmured about her unusual lifestyle and the attention she devoted to the children. Small whispers of distrust arose, suggesting her actions were not as pure as they seemed. Clarisse, however, remained steadfast, teaching the Caldwells that truth and character do not depend on the approval of others. One of the defining moments of this period occurred when Liam participated in a science fair. He presented an innovative project inspired by Clarisse's lessons on responsibility and caring for others. Emily wrote a touching story about friendship and resilience, while Ethan led a community drive to collect food for families in need. Each victory reinforced Clarisse's conviction that values-based education was more powerful than any material privilege. At night, after intense days of learning, conflict, and discovery, Clarisse would sit alone, reflecting on the complexity of raising 3 teenagers with such painful pasts. She knew she couldn't control everything, but she could provide tools, love, and guidance. Each obstacle faced together strengthened the family bond and paved the way for greater challenges that fate had in store. Clarisse also began to notice subtle signs of injustice outside her home. Small, spiteful comments, suspicious looks, and distorted actions by neighbors and local authorities hinted that her altruism might one day be misinterpreted. She sensed that the tranquility of the Caldwells' childhood and early adolescence would not last forever, and that outside forces could threaten everything she had worked so hard to build. Even so, she continued to teach core values: courage in the face of fear, honesty even when no one is watching, empathy for the vulnerable, and the importance of standing up for justice. These principles weren't just academic or family lessons. They were the armor that would prepare Liam, Emily, and Ethan to protect not only themselves, but Clarisse herself when the time came. The Caldwells, even at a young age, began to demonstrate signs of leadership, compassion, and determination. Clarisse's every action, every conversation, every piece of advice became tools that would shape their adult identities. She understood that what she was sowing at that stage would be crucial to everyone's survival in the face of future challenges, including those imposed by a system that doesn't always recognize kindness or merit. Clarisse looked at the 3 teenagers, each dealing with their own fears, achievements, and learning experiences, and felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She knew that life still had many trials in store for them, but she was also certain that, united, they could face any injustice, any adversity, and that the values planted in each heart would be the foundation of a strength that could one day change not only their lives, but hers as well. The Caldwells were now in their late teens, each facing the dilemmas of growing up in different ways. Liam, at 16, sought independence and questioned rules he had previously accepted without question. Emily, now 15, was ambitious and restless, always seeking to prove her worth. Ethan, at 14, remained introspective, but demonstrated a keen sensitivity to injustice and hidden intentions in the people around him. Clarisse, observing closely, knew she needed to guide the teenagers with firmness and empathy. The school years brought new challenges. Liam faced academic competition and the hidden prejudice of more privileged peers. Clarisse taught that knowledge was power, but character and integrity were irreplaceable. Emily, frequently the target of malicious comments about her past, learned to transform insults into motivation, to excel in debates and artistic performances. Ethan, though reserved, began using his observational skills to help friends in need, demonstrating quiet leadership and practical empathy. At home, Clarisse established clear and consistent rules. Study schedules, household responsibilities, and community activities were closely monitored. Every mistake was treated as a learning opportunity, every success as encouragement. The family dynamic strengthened the bonds between the Caldwells, fostering unity, respect, and understanding. As the teenagers grew up, Clarisse also faced external pressures. Small rumors and biased comments about her intentions began to circulate around town. Some neighbors questioned the legality of her actions in taking in abandoned children. Others, driven by envy, tried to distort Clarisse's image in the community. She, however, remained resilient, reinforcing the Caldwells' understanding of the importance of maintaining integrity even in the face of injustice and prejudice. The emotional climax of this period occurred when Emily entered a state literary competition, telling her story of overcoming adversity and gratitude. Her work moved the judges and garnered recognition, but it also drew harsh criticism from those who tried to minimize her achievements. Clarisse once again used the situation as a learning experience, explaining that not everyone will appreciate the truth and that courage is often measured by persistence in the face of hostility. Beyond academic challenges, the Caldwells faced internal questions of identity and belonging. Liam questioned his place in the world and felt the weight of internal and external expectations. Emily struggled to assert herself without losing her true self. Ethan sought to understand how he could use his abilities to promote justice and equity, even when the adults around him seemed to ignore or underestimate these qualities. Clarisse guided each of them, reminding them that strength doesn't mean the absence of fear, but rather the ability to act correctly despite it. Late adolescence also brought to light the importance of social responsibility. Clarisse encouraged the Caldwells to engage in the community, helping neighbors in need, organizing fundraising events, and promoting school projects that positively impacted the surrounding area. Each action reinforced the understanding that kindness is not just an individual act, but a collective practice that strengthens bonds and builds the future. As the Caldwells matured, they showed clear signs that the values Clarisse had imparted were deeply ingrained. Liam became analytical and persistent, Emily bold and creative, Ethan strategic and empathetic. Clarisse, observing their development, understood that the true legacy she was leaving behind was not material, but moral and emotional, principles that no system or adverse circumstance could erase. Clarisse realized that the challenges of adolescence were merely preparation for the much greater trials that the future would bring. She knew that one day she would need these transformed and strengthened young people to face situations that would test not only their courage, but also the justice of the world, the family bond, discipline, and principles she instilled would be the foundation for them all to resist any adversity, including the injustice that was silently beginning to creep into her own life. Time passed quickly, and the Caldwells were now in their late teens. Liam, now 17, demonstrated intense determination and an insatiable curiosity. He spent hours in his room, among books, research, and experiences that expanded his horizons, seeking to understand not only the world around him, but also the systems that shaped society. Emily, at 16, continued her journey of overcoming, learning to transform frustration into creativity. Each poem, short story, or artistic project she presented was a form of expression and resistance, a way of affirming that her story and her voice had value. Ethan, now 15, displayed a strategic intelligence and social sensitivity that often surprised Clarisse. He analyzed behaviors, identified injustices, and reflected on how he could contribute to correcting them, always keeping empathy as his guiding principle. Clarisse understood that this phase required more than discipline. It required dialogue, emotional understanding, and the creation of opportunities for each child to develop autonomy. Family meetings became moments of discussion and reflection. Liam discussed injustices observed at school. Emily talked about the challenges of asserting herself among peers, and Ethan questioned unfair social norms. Clarisse listened, guided, and proposed solutions, teaching them to think critically and ethically. These meetings were not only educational, but also strengthened family bonds and prepared the Caldwells to face the real world with courage and discernment. School life continued to present complex challenges. Liam, frequently confronted with prejudice and unfair competition, learned to channel frustration into focus and dedication, understanding that perseverance often trumps natural talent or external privileges. Emily faced bullying and criticism, but used writing and art as tools of expression and self-confidence, demonstrating resilience and the ability to excel in any environment. Ethan, attentive and observant, applied his critical thinking to small leadership actions, helping classmates and organizing initiatives that positively impacted the school community. As the Caldwells grew up, Clarisse faced increasing external pressures. Small rumors and malicious comments circulated around town, questioning her intentions in caring for the children. Some neighbors insinuated there was something wrong with her behavior, while others quietly praised her. Clarisse understood that even when she was right and fair, kindness could be misinterpreted and even used against her. This silent tension added constant worry to her life, reminding her that acts of love and generosity were not enough to protect herself from the injustices of the outside world. One of the most memorable moments of this period occurred when the Caldwells organized a large food drive for needy families in the community. Liam was responsible for logistics and planning, Emily created promotional materials, and Ethan led the volunteer team. During the project, Clarisse witnessed the children's complete development. They not only applied the teachings they had received, but also demonstrated initiative, leadership, and the ability to inspire others. This event reinforced the importance of combining ethical education with practical actions, shaping conscious citizens prepared to face future challenges. At the same time, internal conflicts frequently arose. Liam questioned rules and boundaries, Emily struggled with criticism and insecurities, Ethan reflected on injustices he couldn't correct alone. Clarisse transformed each situation into a learning experience. She taught them about empathy, assertive communication, conflict resolution, and the importance of acting correctly, even in the face of hostility. Each internal challenge strengthened family cohesion, building a solid foundation for facing greater adversities in the future. Evenings at Clarisse's house were moments of reflection and connection. Liam read about science and technology, Emily wrote and created artwork, Ethan analyzed social problems and devised practical solutions. Clarisse circulated among them, offering guidance, encouraging questions, and stimulating curiosity. Every conversation was a learning opportunity, and every gesture reinforced the understanding that love and discipline must go hand in hand to shape character and resilience. Late adolescence also highlighted the importance of social responsibility. Clarisse encouraged the Caldwells to engage in the community, organizing fundraisers, helping neighbors, and implementing school projects that would make a positive impact. Each practical action solidified the ethical and moral principles she had instilled, demonstrating that kindness and courage are not just individual attitudes, but collective practices capable of transforming lives. Furthermore, Clarisse reinforced that the outside world would not always be fair. Small signs of hostility, envy, and malice began to intensify. Suspicious looks and disparaging comments hinted that their kindness could be distorted, testing their reputation and resilience. She prepared the Caldwells for this reality, teaching them that facing injustice requires wisdom, patience, and courage, but also that one should never compromise one's integrity or moral values. The emotional climax of this group comes when the Caldwells organize a community performance, uniting individual talents and collective efforts. Liam demonstrates technical and strategic skill. Emily moves everyone with her writing and creativity, and Ethan organizes the performance and ensures every detail is thought out to maximize social impact. Clarisse watches with emotion, recognizing that every gesture, every lesson, and every moment of patience has transformed three young people capable of facing any challenge with intelligence, ethics, and empathy. Clarisse reflects on the importance of each year invested in the Caldwells' education, care, and emotional development. She realizes that the values she instilled, courage, empathy, discipline, integrity, and dedication, are the foundations that will enable them to withstand any future adversity, including the injustice that silently looms. More than preparing children, she shaped future leaders and advocates for justice, ensuring that her legacy would be deep and lasting, ready to face the challenges fate has in store for them. The Caldwells' early adulthood marked a period of even more intense discovery and challenge. Liam, now 18, decided to expand his studies and explore areas of advanced technology and applied science. Emily, at 17, enrolled in literature and performing arts courses, seeking not only knowledge but also ways to use her voice to impact society. Ethan, at 16, deepened his understanding of social and political issues, dedicating himself to community leadership projects and strategic volunteering. Clarisse watched with attention and pride, but also with concern, aware that the adult world would bring completely different challenges than those faced during adolescence. The daily routine transformed. Liam spent long hours in labs and libraries, Emily in workshops and presentations, Ethan in community meetings and social outreach. Clarisse, while maintaining her community activities, felt the need to act as a mentor and guide even more strategically, offering advice on ethics, responsibility, and complex decision-making. The family dynamic evolved toward a balance between independence and guidance. Each Caldwell began to make more autonomous decisions, but Clarisse remained the central point of moral and emotional reference. As the young people explored their capabilities, small signs of external hostility began to intensify. Malicious comments in town about Clarisse's conduct, once discreet, began to gain traction. Rumors insinuated irregularities in her protection and upbringing of the Caldwells, questioning her integrity and intentions. Clarisse, aware of the potential impact of these rumors, used each situation as a lesson in resilience for the young people. She taught them to distinguish constructive criticism from unfair attacks and to maintain composure in the face of injustice. External pressure coincided with internal challenges. Liam faced academic difficulties and ethical questions in research projects involving colleagues from diverse backgrounds and interests. Emily dealt with artistic frustrations and prejudice within the cultural circles she sought to connect with. Ethan faced moral dilemmas related to community activities, constantly questioning whether his actions were sufficient or whether they could cause unintended consequences. Clarisse acted as a mediator, reinforcing the importance of integrity and responsible action even when the world seemed unfair or hostile. A defining moment occurred when Emily entered a regional literary competition, where her work on resilience and empathy moved judges but also drew criticism from jealous competitors who sought to discredit her talent. Liam, involved in an innovative technology project, faced sabotage and disagreements with colleagues, testing his perseverance and ability to solve problems ethically. Ethan, leading a fundraising campaign for vulnerable families, had to deal with bureaucratic resistance and skepticism from community members who doubted his competence due to his age and limited experience. Each of these challenges became a learning opportunity. Clarisse guided the Caldwells with strategies of critical thinking, practical ethics, and strategic planning, demonstrating that adulthood would require not only knowledge, but also emotional resilience, courage, and the ability to confront injustice intelligently and with structure. The family bond, forged over years of discipline, care, and love, became the foundation that would sustain them through each obstacle. At the same time, the shadow of injustice began to loom more large over Clarisse. Small misunderstandings and malicious interpretations of her actions began to be amplified by neighbors and influential local figures. Rumors insinuating that she had committed wrongdoing to protect the Caldwells began to spread systematically. Clarisse, aware of the risk that these accusations could escalate into serious legal trouble, began documenting her actions, gathering evidence of good practices, and keeping detailed records of all activities involving the Caldwells and the community. This phase also brought profound reflections for the Caldwells. Liam began to question the concepts of justice and power, realizing how systems can be manipulated against innocent people. Emily, faced with criticism and prejudice, further developed her social sensitivity, understanding that talent and merit often need to be defended courageously. Ethan, attentive to the injustices he observed, began to strategize how to use information, resources, and alliances to face ethical and legal challenges, learning that preparation and emotional intelligence are as important as the will to act correctly. The climax of this block occurs when a series of events puts Clarisse under suspicion. An incident in the town, distorted by rumors and bad faith, sparks rumors that she had broken rules to benefit the Caldwells. Although there was no real basis, the community begins to question her conduct, and the pressure intensifies. Clarisse, though shaken, remains calm and uses the episode as a lesson in courage and resilience for the Caldwells. The world will not always recognize truth or goodness, but our strength lies in continuing to do what is right, even when we are unfairly judged. At this point, the Caldwells demonstrate emotional growth and the ability to face adversity. Liam uses logic and analysis to debunk rumors. Emily transforms words into tools of communication and influence, and Ethan articulates practical actions to protect Clarisse's reputation. Each young person acts as an extension of the ethics and intelligence Clarisse has cultivated over the years, demonstrating that investing in character and principles is what guarantees strength in the face of injustice. The narrative establishes the transition from adolescence to adulthood, showing that the Caldwells are prepared to face complex challenges, while Clarisse realizes that signs of injustice can become concrete threats. The story reinforces the importance of values, emotional preparation, strategic intelligence, and family unity, setting the stage for the greater conflict to come. The trial and unjust accusations against Clarisse, which will test everything built over years of dedication, love, and resilience. As adulthood brought the Caldwells increasing responsibilities, Clarisse realized the outside world was becoming an even more challenging testing ground. Rumors and insinuations about her conduct began to intensify, reaching the ears of local authorities and influential neighbors. Small events, previously ignored or considered trivial, began to be observed with suspicion, amplified by malicious comments and hasty judgments. Clarisse felt her reputation, built on decades of hard work and generosity, was being quietly undermined. Liam, increasingly involved in technology and science, noticed that peers and even teachers were making subtle comments about him and his family, questioning the merit of his achievements. Emily, with her artistic sensitivity and empathy, realized that some of the criticism was tinged with envy and attempts to discredit his story of overcoming obstacles. Ethan, always alert to social injustices, began to map patterns of prejudice and manipulation, understanding that these external forces could become concrete barriers against his family. Clarisse, observing, knew she needed to act strategically, teaching them to recognize and face adversity ethically and effectively. The first major incident occurred during a community meeting about social projects. Clarisse was presenting plans to expand food drive initiatives and support for underprivileged children when malicious comments began to surface. Some insinuated that Clarisse was receiving undue financial benefits or favoring the Caldwells over others. The initially collaborative atmosphere turned palpable. Clarisse remained calm, responding clearly and transparently, explaining every detail of the actions and resources used. The Caldwells, present, observed the situation closely, learning the importance of maintaining integrity and composure even in the face of unfair accusations. After the incident, Clarisse began systematically documenting all family and community activities, gathering evidence of good practices, testimonies from trusted neighbors, and clear financial records. Liam helped with spreadsheets and data analysis. Emily organized written reports, and Ethan gathered information on behavioral patterns and malicious rumors. This work was not only preventative, it was preparation for potential formal confrontations, demonstrating that unity, organization, and clarity can be powerful weapons against injustice. Meanwhile, the Caldwells were rapidly maturing. Liam began leading small technology projects that sought solutions to community problems, demonstrating his ability for strategic planning and innovation. Emily used her writing and artistic skills to raise awareness about social causes in the community, transforming her talent into a positive influence. Ethan, with an analytical and ethical vision, structured engagement and volunteer campaigns, demonstrating a skill for mobilizing people and resources efficiently. Clarisse watched each step with pride, aware that she was raising not just children, but citizens capable of facing complex challenges. On a personal level, the Caldwells also faced internal conflicts. Liam struggled to balance ambition and ethics, questioning how much he should give in to external pressures to achieve recognition. Emily grappled with insecurities and comparisons, trying to maintain her confidence in the face of often unfair criticism. Ethan reflected on the limits of his impact, learning that good intentions aren't always enough in a world filled with conflicting interests. Clarisse, ever present, offered support, teaching them how to balance strength and empathy, determination and prudence. External tension began to rise when community members began formally questioning the legality of Clarisse's guardianship and care for the Caldwells. Small allegations, based on rumors and unfounded assumptions, surfaced with city officials, creating a hostile environment. Clarisse, aware that these accusations could escalate into serious legal problems, intensified her documentation and organizational efforts, demonstrating to the Caldwells that preparation and planning are essential to protecting what is fair and true. During this period, important lessons emerged amidst adversity. Liam learned the importance of patience and strategy when dealing with more experienced and influential adversaries. Emily understood that talent and ethics must be combined with courage, especially when public opinion can be manipulated. Ethan realized that conscious action, research, and analysis are powerful tools for confronting systemic injustices. Clarisse constantly reinforced that facing challenges didn't mean acting impulsively, but rather combining intelligence, values, and courage. One of the most tense episodes occurred when a city official, influenced by rumors, formally questioned Clarisse's conduct at a public meeting. The entire city seemed to be watching her critically. Clarisse responded firmly, explaining her actions in detail, showing records and testimony, and demonstrating that There was nothing wrong with her decisions. The Caldwells participated actively, each contributing according to their strengths. Liam presented data, Emily presented written reports, and Ethan explained the rationale behind the community campaigns. The combination of clarity, preparation, and emotional presence transformed what could have been a devastating attack into a demonstration of integrity and family unity. This period further strengthened the Caldwells, cementing the importance of values such as courage, integrity, empathy, and resilience. Clarisse realized that the young people were becoming true defenders of truth, capable of acting intelligently and ethically, even when pressured by injustice or malice. The experience also reinforced the understanding that injustice and prejudice are not just external challenges, but tests that shape character, strategy, and moral strength. The narrative establishes a clear transition to the more serious legal confrontation that lies ahead, showing how the preparation, family unity, and ethical values cultivated by Clarisse over the years formed the necessary foundation to face even greater challenges. The story continues to explore not only external injustice, but also the Caldwells' personal and moral transformation, demonstrating that every act of kindness, every lesson, and every moment of preparation will contribute to the future fight for justice and recognition of the truth. The mood in the town gradually began to shift. Small, previously quiet rumors turned into more visible debates, and Clarisse Monroe's reputation began to be questioned in various social circles. Some neighbors, motivated by envy or misinformation, began to suggest that her involvement with the Caldwells might be motivated by personal or financial interests. Clarisse, even aware of the corrosive effect of these comments, remained steadfast, maintaining her routine and the teachings she had cultivated in her young people for years. She knew that the truth was her greatest defense, but she also understood that preparing the Caldwells to face public and legal attacks was equally essential. The turning point came when the case began to attract the attention of local authorities. A group of city officials, influenced by rumors, formally questioned her conduct. The accusation was vague, but enough to create tension and insecurity. Clarisse responded calmly, presenting detailed records of all activities undertaken for the Caldwells, education, and well-being, including testimonies from neighbors, school documents, and community project reports. Every detail reinforced her integrity and demonstrated that her commitment had always been genuine. Liam, now 18, took on a leadership role alongside his mother. He organized data, spreadsheets, and presentations, objectively demonstrating that all of Clarisse's actions were correct and transparent. Emily, sensitive and articulate, prepared texts explaining the cultural and social activities they participated in, highlighting the positive impacts and the ethical manner in which everything was conducted. Ethan, meticulous and strategic, analyzed the behavior of the complainants and mapped patterns of attempted manipulation or distortion of the facts. Their collaborative work strengthened not only Clarisse's defense, but also the maturity of the young people, who became increasingly capable of confronting injustice in a conscious and structured manner. The initial trial began on a chilly morning with the courtroom nearly packed. The tension was palpable. Clarisse felt the weight of the community's gaze upon her, and the Caldwells, now young adults, were at her side, ready to support and act strategically. The appointed prosecutor, Jonathan Pierce, carried a firm and relentless stance. Known for his ambition and skill in manipulating perceptions, he presented the case in a way that emphasized suspicion and questioned Clarisse's morality, without ever presenting concrete evidence. His every word seemed calculated to create doubt, eliciting murmurs and suspicious glances from the audience. Clarisse remained calm, aware that any display of nervousness could be interpreted against her. Her eyes, however, conveyed firmness and confidence. Liam presented detailed data and documentary reports that refuted each accusation, using graphs and timelines to demonstrate that his mother's every action was legal and ethical. Emily read an emotional statement, describing how Clarisse not only offered them shelter, but also shaped their lives, cultivating values of integrity, empathy, and responsibility. Ethan presented behavioral analyses and rumor patterns, showing that the accusations were the result of third-party distortion and malice, not actual wrongdoing. Despite meticulous preparation, the prosecutor attempted to undermine each argument with carefully chosen words, exploiting subtle prejudices and stereotypes related to Clarisse's background and age. He insinuated that her blackness, living in a poor neighborhood, made her conduct suspect, seeking to exploit unconscious biases present in the jurors and the community. Clarisse, however, remained steadfast, demonstrating a calmness that contrasted with Pierce's aggressiveness, showing the court that strength and dignity do not depend on the approval of others. The Caldwells, attentive, felt for the first time the true weight of structured injustice. Each of the prosecutor's arguments seemed less about facts and more about manipulating perceptions. Liam recognized the need to use logic and evidence to counter false narratives. Emily grasped the importance of convincingly communicating emotion and humanity. Ethan understood that justice requires strategy, patience, and long-term vision. Clarisse, observing her children, realized that all their years of teaching were about to be intensely tested, and that their preparation would become crucial in facing the justice system. The trial progressed, details from the past began to emerge. Small events, previously forgotten or ignored, were used to question Clarisse's character. The prosecutor cited isolated incidents of hearsay, distorting them and presenting them as evidence of alleged wrongdoing. Clarisse responded clearly, contextualizing each situation and demonstrating the genuine intent behind each action. The Caldwells supported the defense with testimony and analysis, demonstrating not only knowledge, but also maturity, strategy, and eloquence. The trial's progress began to attract local media attention. Reporters and curious citizens began closely following each hearing, creating an environment of additional pressure. Clarisse realized that her story and that of the Caldwells could be distorted for sensational purposes, but she also saw an opportunity to present the truth in a transparent and inspiring way. Emily, in particular, felt a responsibility to use her words carefully, conveying emotion, without losing credibility, demonstrating that narrative and evidence can coexist to bring justice. A reflection from Clarisse. Justice is not always immediate or perceptible, and often requires resilience, strategy, and courage to be achieved. The Caldwells, now young adults, begin to understand that the world can be cruel and unfair, but that family unity, preparation, and strong values are essential to resist and prevail. The narrative sets the stage for the next step in the story. The escalation of tension, the prosecutor's manipulation, and the emergence of the first false evidence that will test the family's emotional and ethical strength. The courtroom became a stage for growing tensions. Each hearing exposed not only Clarisse's struggle, but also the Caldwells' growing up. Liam took a strategic approach, precisely questioning documents and testimony presented by the prosecutor. His ability to connect facts and evidence began to impress some jurors, although the prosecutor continued to manipulate perceptions and exploit unspoken prejudices present in the room. Emily, always sensitive, noticed nuances in the trials, suspicious looks, condescending smiles, and veiled comments that attempted to undermine her and her mother's confidence. Ethan, observant and meticulous, began to trace patterns in the prosecution's behavior, anticipating moves and preparing responses that strengthened the defense. Clarisse felt the weight of every word, every gesture, but her firm posture conveyed dignity and control. She knew that more than winning the trial itself, she needed to show who she truly was. A dedicated, upright woman who had transformed lives and offered opportunities where there had been abandonment and despair. The hearing became a test of emotional endurance, strategic intelligence, and moral courage. Every move was decisive, and any flaw could be used by the prosecutor to distort the narrative. Amidst this turmoil, the first signs of direct manipulation of the evidence emerged. Old documents began to be presented out of context. Photos and reports were interpreted biasedly, and neutral testimony was transformed into veiled accusations. Prosecutor Jonathan Pierce operated with precision, seeking to create a narrative that painted Clarisse as a criminal without presenting concrete evidence of wrongdoing. Clarisse, in turn, reacted clearly and patiently, deconstructing each argument and revealing the truth behind each document, testimony, and event mentioned. The external environment also became a pressure factor. Local media began following every step of the trial, turning the case into a recurring story. Some reporters approached the situation sensationally, distorting information to create tension and controversy. Others, however, showed empathy and genuine interest in Clarisse's story, highlighting her history of kindness and dedication. This duality reinforced the need for Clarisse and the Caldwells to maintain absolute focus on defending the truth, unfazed by external narratives. During a particularly tense hearing, Emily presented a written statement describing in detail the impact her mother had on the Caldwells' lives. She spoke of difficult nights, learning experiences, lessons in ethics, courage, and empathy, and how Clarisse had completely transformed their lives. The testimony moved the courtroom, eliciting expressions of surprise and admiration from some jurors, while others remained impassive, swayed by the prosecutor's narrative. Liam complemented this with a visual presentation of data and records, chronologically demonstrating each action Clarisse took to benefit the family and the community. Ethan, attentive to the dynamics of the hearing, observed the reactions, adjusted strategies, and intervened with logical analyses to bolster the defense's credibility. The Caldwells, increasingly aware of the power of narrative and evidence, began to understand how external manipulations can influence important decisions. Liam realized that facts alone are not enough. They must be presented strategically. Emily understood that emotion and clarity are essential to raise awareness and convince. Ethan understood that anticipating adverse events and meticulously analyzing patterns are indispensable tools for confronting complex and unjust systems. Clarisse, watching their growth, felt profound pride, realizing that years of dedication had transformed not only her family, but also each young person's resilience. The prosecutor, realizing his strategy was facing resistance, intensified his efforts. He began calling witnesses who could, even indirectly, suggest wrongdoing in Clarisse's conduct. Each statement was carefully crafted to insinuate suspicion, exploiting social prejudices and the public's perception of social and racial difference. Clarisse, prepared for this situation, presented counter-evidence, statements from neighbors, and records demonstrating that all her actions were legitimate, ethical, and motivated by compassion. The tension grew with each intervention, making the trial a true test of endurance and strategy. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, the community was divided. Some residents began to question their own judgment, reflecting on Clarisse's positive impact on the Caldwells' lives and the town. Others remained skeptical, influenced by rumors and distorted narratives. Clarisse knew the battle wasn't limited to the courtroom. It was also a war for public perception, where truth, empathy, and strategy needed to coexist to ensure justice. The culmination of this phase occurred when a key witness, previously neutral, testified clearly and unequivocally, corroborating Clarisse's story and refuting several accusations. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak: fixed stares, held breaths, and absolute silence. Every word uttered reinforced the narrative of kindness, integrity, and dedication that Clarisse had built throughout her life, while the prosecutor unsuccessfully attempted to discredit her testimony with technical arguments and unfounded assumptions. By the end of this phase, Clarisse, the Caldwells, and everyone involved realized the power of preparation, family unity, and integrity in the face of injustice. The narrative shows that, even amid manipulation and external pressure, it is possible to resist and preserve the truth when ethics, strategic intelligence, and emotional courage are combined. This stage sets the stage for the upcoming, more intense confrontations, in which the prosecutor's ambition and the system's fragility will be tested against the determination and resilience of Clarisse and the Caldwells. The tension increased with each passing day. Prosecutor Jonathan Pierce was not content with simply questioning Clarisse. He began investigating every detail of her life, trying to find any point that could be used to weaken her defense. Old documents, community project reports, and even letters from neighbors were scrutinized. Pierce sought to create a convincing narrative that Clarisse had committed wrongdoing, even if it meant distorting facts or presenting evidence out of context. Clarisse, however, remained steadfast. She knew that the defense's success depended not only on proving the truth, but also on anticipating the prosecutor's moves. Every conversation with the Caldwells was strategic. Liam organized information and prepared detailed charts and timelines. Emily crafted explanatory and emotional texts to reinforce the human side of the story, and Ethan monitored behavioral patterns and manipulated information ethically to strengthen the family narrative. The entire family worked as a cohesive unit, demonstrating that preparation and unity are powerful weapons against injustice. The psychological impact of these investigations began to take its toll. Clarisse felt the weight of constant surveillance, moral and social judgment, and the pressure to remain calm in the face of false accusations. The Caldwells, in turn, had to confront their own fears and frustrations. Liam questioned his own ability to navigate complex systems, Emily struggled with insecurities heightened by public scrutiny, and Ethan pondered the balance between acting fairly and not being intimidated. Clarisse transformed each challenge into a lesson. Resilience, strategic planning, and ethics were essential to surviving this storm. One of the most striking events of this phase occurred when Pierce attempted to manipulate community witnesses. Some neighbors, fearful or misinformed, were called to testify to suggest irregularities in Clarisse's conduct. However, the Monroe family's prior preparation proved decisive. Each neighbor was instructed to recount truthful and detailed experiences, demonstrating Clarisse's coherence, consistency, and positive impact on the community. The witnesses demonstrated that her actions were motivated by altruism, compassion, and a deep sense of social responsibility, carefully dismantling the prosecutor's attempts to create unfounded doubts. The trial continued, and the tension increased with each new hearing. Pierce became more aggressive in his stance, using rhetorical techniques to provoke doubt in the jurors and create a negative narrative. Clarisse responded calmly, maintaining her composure and reinforcing the central points. Her integrity, dedication to the Caldwells, and contribution to the community. Each intervention was planned, each word carefully chosen to balance emotion and logic, showing the jurors that justice and truth are not just abstract concepts, but realities that can be demonstrated with concrete facts and ethical behavior. Meanwhile, external pressure intensified. Local media began covering the case more frequently, and the public was divided between those who believed in Clarisse's goodness and those influenced by rumors and the prosecutor's manipulations. Clarisse realized that her reputation could be distorted, but she also understood that this attention offered an opportunity to show the world, transparently and truthfully, who she really was. Emily, in particular, began writing articles and testimonials that were read and shared, presenting the Monroe family's story from a perspective of truth and ethics. Liam and Ethan, each in their own way, began preparing detailed analyses of the impact of the charges on public and legal perception. They studied trial patterns, juror behavior, and prosecutorial manipulation strategies, developing methods to diffuse attacks and bolster the defense's credibility. Clarisse watched, pleased with their growth, realizing that the education, discipline, and love she had dedicated years to were now producing concrete results in high-pressure situations. The climax of this phase occurs when Pierce presents evidence he believes to be decisive, an old document that, taken out of context, could suggest misconduct by Clarisse. The courtroom fills with tension. Clarisse and the Caldwells respond with a detailed analysis, contextualizing the document, presenting additional evidence and testimony that proves its honesty. The audience, initially shocked, begins to perceive the manipulation, while the jurors reconsider their initial interpretation. This moment reinforces the narrative's central theme. Injustice and manipulation can be confronted with truth, strategy, and courage. Clarisse and the Caldwells demonstrate that preparation, unity, and integrity are crucial to resisting systems that often favor personal interests and ambitions over the truth. The experience makes everyone more aware of the challenge that still lies ahead, facing the final judgment, fully exposing corruption, and proving Clarisse's innocence in the face of a resistant and biased system. The story thus sets the stage for the next phase, in which the confrontation with the prosecutor and the authorities will reach its critical point, testing the family's emotional, ethical, and strategic limits. Clarisse realizes that every documented detail, every testimony, and every previous action were crucial to confronting an injustice that threatened not only her freedom, but also the dignity and legacy she had built over decades. Tensions continued to rise, and Clarisse knew she was approaching a decisive moment. Prosecutor Jonathan Pierce, increasingly aggressive, sought ways to manipulate evidence and testimony to create a narrative of guilt that he believed would strengthen his career. He reviewed every detail of Clarisse and the Caldwells' lives, trying to identify any weaknesses or inconsistencies that could be exploited in court. The atmosphere in town grew increasingly tense. Whispers, suspicious looks, and snide comments spread among neighbors and acquaintances. The pressure on Clarisse mounted, but she remained calm, aware that preparation, strategy, and family unity would be crucial to weathering this storm. Liam intensified his organizational efforts. He created a detailed timeline, gathering all the significant events involving Clarisse and the Caldwells, demonstrating the coherence and consistency of their actions over the decades. Emily, in turn, wrote emotional statements, testimonies that highlighted her mother's kindness and integrity, but always with clarity, avoiding exaggeration or sentimentality that could be exploited by the prosecutor. Ethan studied the prosecutor's every move, analyzing behavioral patterns, persuasion strategies, and potential legal loopholes that could be exploited to strengthen the defense. Working together transformed the family into a unit of resistance, each with a specific role, complementing each other's efforts. The next trial began on a tense morning. The courtroom was packed with interested parties, journalists eager for details, and jurors hanging on every word. Pierce began his presentation with a firm stance, using rhetorical and manipulative techniques to suggest that Clarisse had acted questionably. He drew on old documents, out-of-context testimony, and rumors, attempting to paint a picture of a woman acting in her own self-interest. Clarisse listened attentively to each argument, maintaining her composure, while the Caldwells watched, ready to intervene when necessary. The first significant intervention came from Liam. He presented graphs, reports, and documentary evidence that contextualized Clarisse's every action, demonstrating that all initiatives were legitimate and focused on the well-being of the family and community. Every detail, from community activities to education and support for the Caldwells, was presented clearly and in a structured manner. Emily complemented this with her personal testimony, vividly describing how her mother impacted their lives, providing a human and emotional testimony that contrasted with the prosecutor's manipulative narrative. Ethan, attentive to the jurors' reactions, offered analyses that dismantled biased arguments, explaining patterns and evidence logically and convincingly. Pierce, realizing his attempts were being neutralized, became more aggressive. He began pressing witnesses, trying to elicit answers that might suggest wrongdoing. Clarisse, however, was prepared. Each witness had been coached on how to report facts accurately and honestly, providing full context and eliminating potential misinterpretations. The strategy proved effective. Each of the prosecutor's attacks was neutralized, and the truth began to emerge indisputably. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, the town was divided. Some residents were beginning to recognize the value of Clarisse's actions, reflecting on how she had transformed lives, while others remained swayed by rumors and historical prejudices. The local media exacerbated this divide. Some outlets reported the case sensitively and in detail, highlighting Clarisse's ethics and dedication, while others sought sensationalism, emphasizing suspicions and rumors. Emily realized that her writing could help balance the narrative, conveying information ethically and emotionally, reinforcing public perception of the truth. A critical point arose when the prosecutor presented a document he believed to be incriminating. Taken out of context, the document could suggest misconduct by Clarisse. The tension in the courtroom became almost palpable. Clarisse, along with the Caldwells, reacted immediately. Liam detailed the chronology, contextualizing the document, and presented additional evidence that clearly demonstrated the honesty and integrity of Clarisse's actions. Emily read a detailed account of personal and community experiences, reinforcing her mother's altruistic character. Ethan analyzed the prosecutor's manipulative patterns, dismantling any arguments based on biased interpretation. The witness testimony, combined with the Caldwell's presentation, began to turn the trial around. Jurors and observers realized that Pierce's narrative was built more on manipulation than on concrete evidence. The courtroom became a space for reflection on justice, ethics, and truth. Clarisse maintained her firm posture, exuding confidence and dignity, demonstrating that her life and actions were consistent with the values she had cultivated for decades. The psychological impact of this phase was intense. Clarisse felt the weight of responsibility to prove her integrity and protect her family, while the Caldwells understood for the first time how powerful and cruel injustice can be when combined with ambition and manipulation. Liam understood that analytical skills and organization are crucial to resisting unfair attacks. Emily realized that clear and ethical communication is essential to raising awareness and positively influencing. Ethan learned that strategy, observation, and anticipation are vital to neutralizing sophisticated manipulation. The culmination of this stage was reached when the defense presented a body of evidence that not only contradicted the accusations, but also revealed the prosecutor's intent to manipulate the court's perception. Silence fell over the courtroom, and the jurors began to reconsider Pierce's narrative. Clarisse, along with the Caldwells, demonstrated that truth, combined with preparation, unity, and courage, can withstand even the most intense pressure and the most sophisticated manipulation. This phase of the narrative sets the stage for the final events, in which structural injustice, prejudice, and the prosecutor's ambition will be confronted head-on with irrefutable evidence, emotional courage, and clever strategy. Clarisse and the Caldwells are ready to face the defining moments that will define not only their reputations, but also the legacy of integrity, compassion, and resilience they have built over decades. The courtroom was packed, the atmosphere charged with tension and anticipation. Every glance seemed to weigh heavily on Clarisse, and the pressure on the Caldwells was almost tangible. Jonathan Pierce, more confident than ever, prepared his final attempts to influence jurors and witnesses. He had carefully selected each argument, each piece of evidence, seeking to construct a convincing narrative of guilt, even if it was based on distortions and half-truths. But Clarisse and the Caldwells were ready. Years of preparation, family unity, and strategic learning had culminated in this decisive moment. The prosecutor began the session with an aggressive argument, reviewing old documents and citing testimony out of context. He attempted to transform small inconsistencies, nuances of interpretation, or simple recording errors into evidence of misconduct. Each sentence was carefully calibrated to create doubt and manipulate perceptions, exploiting subtle biases related to Clarisse's race, age, and social status. But the defense was prepared. Liam presented a detailed analysis, contextualizing each document, explaining the background, and presenting additional evidence that reinforced Clarisse's integrity. Graphs, timelines, and precise data systematically dismantled the prosecutor's every argument. Emily, with a firm and confident voice, took the floor to recount personal and community experiences. Her narrative wasn't just emotional, it was structured, demonstrating the coherence and real impact of Clarisse's actions on her own life and the lives of countless others, who had received help over the years. Every detail reinforced the image of a selfless, dedicated, and ethical woman. Ethan, carefully observing the reactions of the audience and the judges, presented a strategic analysis of Pierce's attempts at manipulation, explaining how biased interpretations and rumors were being used to create a false narrative. Meanwhile, the media closely followed the hearing. Some outlets sought sensationalism, exaggerating accusations and rumors, while others highlighted Clarisse's integrity and dedication, revealing the complexity and injustice of the case. Public attention increased pressure, but also offered the opportunity to present the truth transparently. The entire town was divided. Residents who had witnessed Clarisse's kindness felt a surge of support, while others, influenced by prejudice and rumors, remained skeptical. The prosecutor, realizing his strategies were being neutralized, became more aggressive. He began pressuring key witnesses, trying to elicit answers that might suggest wrongdoing in Clarisse's conduct. However, the defense had carefully prepared each statement. The witnesses recounted authentic, consistent, and detailed experiences, demonstrating unequivocally that Clarisse's actions were always motivated by altruism and ethics. Each attempt at manipulation was neutralized with clarity and precision, leaving Pierce increasingly frustrated and visibly upset. Liam and Ethan continued to monitor the prosecutor's every move and the audience's reaction. They noticed patterns of psychological pressure and perception manipulation, using this knowledge to adjust strategies in real time. Emily, for her part, focused on communicating emotion in a structured way, conveying the story of her mother and family in an engaging and compelling way. Clarisse watched proudly, watching her children apply the skills, values, and principles she had taught them over the years, demonstrating that preparation, ethics, and unity can confront even the most systematic injustice. The critical moment of the hearing came when Pierce presented evidence he believed to be definitive, an old document that, taken out of context, could suggest misconduct by Clarisse. The tension in the room became palpable. Clarisse calmly and clearly contextualized the document, explaining the situation in detail and presenting additional evidence that completely dismantled the prosecutor's interpretation. Emily reinforced her testimony with emotional accounts, and Liam presented precise analyses that demonstrated the consistency of Clarisse's actions over time. Ethan, attentive to the nuances of the trial, highlighted patterns of manipulation and inconsistency in the prosecutor's arguments, reinforcing the defense's credibility. The audience began to realize that Pierce's narrative was flawed, based more on manipulation than concrete evidence. Jurors who initially seemed influenced began to question their perceptions, evaluating each argument more critically. Clarisse maintained a firm and dignified posture, conveying confidence and authenticity, while the Caldwells demonstrated maturity, strategy, and eloquence in their interventions. This moment marks the beginning of the narrative's climax, the exposure of the manipulations, the final confrontation with the prosecutor, and the unequivocal demonstration of Clarisse's integrity. Each testimony, analysis, and piece of evidence presented not only defended Clarisse's innocence, but also revealed the strength, resilience, and intelligence of the entire family. The story makes it clear that injustice, manipulation, and prejudice can be confronted with unity, strategy, ethics, and courage. The tension continues to build, setting the stage for the final twists and turns, where the corruption of the system will be fully exposed, the truth about Clarisse will be recognized, and the Caldwells will play a decisive role in transforming the fight for justice into a symbol of resistance and hope. The courtroom seemed to carry the weight of decades of injustice, concentrated in a single point. Clarisse felt the gaze of every juror on her, aware that her every move and word would be scrutinized. Jonathan Pierce, increasingly frustrated with the defense's resistance, intensified his attempts at manipulation, alternating technical arguments with veiled attacks on Clarisse's morality. He resorted to old evidence, ambiguous testimony, and biased interpretations of past events, trying to create enough doubt to convince the jurors that Clarisse was untrustworthy. The Caldwells, now mature and strategic adults, assumed decisive roles in this confrontation. Liam continued to organize information, cross-reference data, and present evidence demonstrating coherence and consistency in Clarisse's every action. He prepared detailed presentations, timelines, and pattern analyses that demonstrated how his mother's every decision had been made ethically and transparently. Emily, with her communicative skills, recounted life experiences, positive impacts on the community, and the personal transformation Clarisse had brought about, presenting an emotional, compelling, and structured narrative. Ethan observed every reaction, every change in expression and posture, ready to adjust strategies in real time and dismantle any attempt at distortion or manipulation by the prosecutor. The pressure mounted as the hearing progressed. Pierce attempted to use neutral testimony against Clarisse, insinuating misconduct or dubious intentions. Clarisse patiently and firmly presented meticulous counter-evidence. Detailed testimony from neighbors, community records, school records, and reports of social welfare activities. Each element completely refuted the prosecutor's accusations, revealing the truth about her integrity, dedication, and altruism. The jurors, previously swayed by rumors and distortions, began to realize that Pierce's narrative was based solely on manipulation, not on concrete facts. At a critical juncture, Emily offered a narrative about a specific night over 20 years ago when Clarisse rescued the Caldwells as children from a situation of extreme abandonment and helplessness. She described meticulous details, the biting cold that night, the siblings' hunger and fear, and the way Clarisse, even with limited resources, welcomed them without hesitation. The story moved the room, demonstrating not only courage and compassion, but also the transformation that act of kindness had wrought over the years. Every detail reinforced the central point. Clarisse was not guilty of anything. She was a guardian of lives, a force for positive change in an often cruel and unjust world. Liam, in turn, presented objective analyses of Clarisse's every action over the decades. He connected evidence, reports, testimonies, and chronological data to demonstrate the coherence and integrity of his mother's actions. Each graph and timeline carefully dismantled the prosecutor's attempts to suggest wrongdoing. Ethan completed the picture with assessments of behavioral patterns and manipulative strategies, demonstrating how Pierce was attempting to mislead her through biases, fallacies, and half-truths. The prosecutor, visibly under pressure, escalated his verbal attacks, using aggressive rhetoric and attempting to emotionally destabilize Clarisse and the Caldwells. He sought to provoke lapses, any sign of nervousness or hesitation that could be interpreted against them. However, the defense was prepared. Clarisse maintained a firm and calm posture. Liam and Ethan monitored every strategic detail, and Emily communicated emotions and facts clearly and convincingly. The balance between rationality, strategy, and emotion became the main weapon against the prosecutor's manipulation. The audience watched in tense silence. Every word, every gesture, and every piece of evidence presented shaped the collective perception of the truth of the case. The media, present in growing numbers, broadcast details that resonated throughout the city. Some journalists highlighted Clarisse's injustice and integrity, while others, still focused on sensationalism, sought to exploit rumors and distortions. Emily realized that public communication was as important as the arguments in court. Each testimony and each narrative helped to balance public perception, broadening the understanding of the truth. A turning point occurred when Pierce attempted to present an old document allegedly indicating misconduct. Out of context, the document appeared to be solid evidence against Clarisse. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Clarisse contextualized the document, showing the sequence of events in detail and precision. Liam supplemented it with graphic and chronological analyses that made any misinterpretation impossible. Emily added emotional and contextualized accounts, reinforcing Clarisse's integrity and kindness. Ethan highlighted patterns of the prosecutor's manipulation, explaining how each argument was strategically constructed to mislead. At that moment, the silence in the courtroom revealed a turning point. Jurors and observers began to realize that Pierce was using manipulation, not facts, to support his accusations. The defense demonstrated irrefutably that Clarisse had always acted with honesty and dedication. Each attack by the prosecutor was carefully dismantled, exposing the structural injustice and prejudices that attempted to mask the truth. Clarisse and the Caldwells demonstrated that unity, ethics, courage, and strategy can withstand even the most sophisticated manipulative attacks. And now, if you're enjoying this exciting story and want to follow every detail until the final outcome, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this fight for justice, courage, and redemption. The next moment brought new twists. Pierce, realizing the narrative was turning against him, began pressing witnesses more aggressively, trying to elicit answers that might seem unfavorable to Clarisse. However, each witness was prepared to report facts accurately and authentically. They described direct experiences with Clarisse, demonstrating consistency, coherence, and the genuine positive impact of her actions. Each intervention reinforced the protagonist's central narrative of kindness, courage, and ethics. The Monroe family, united, faced the height of tension. Clarisse felt the pressure, but transformed her fear into strength, inspiring the Caldwells to focus and strategy. Liam, Emily, and Ethan worked in perfect synchrony. Evidence, testimony, and analysis were presented in a coordinated manner, ensuring that each attack was neutralized and the truth was clearly revealed. The court began to realize that Clarisse's story was much more than a simple legal case. It was a demonstration of resilience, justice, and humanity. The climax of the hearing approached. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, and each strategic analysis gathered strength to demonstrate Clarisse's integrity. The prosecutor, exhausted and frustrated, began to lose credibility in the face of the clarity, cohesion, and emotion presented by the defense. Clarisse, steadfast, conveyed the central message. Even in the face of injustice, courage, preparation, and ethics prevail. The courtroom was completely silent, every detail of the hearing carrying weight and meaning. Clarisse, sitting upright, exuded firmness and serenity, but felt the pressure of injustice looming over her. Jonathan Pierce, realizing his attempts at manipulation were failing, intensified his verbal attacks. He resorted to every possible argument, trying to exploit any doubts, half-truths, or implicit biases among the jurors. But the defense was prepared. Every move was strategically calculated to neutralize the prosecutor's distortions. Liam presented a detailed visual report connecting decades of Clarisse's actions to the positive transformation in the lives of the Caldwells and countless others benefiting from her community initiatives. Each graph, each timeline, reinforced the coherence and integrity of his mother's actions, completely dismantling Pierce's accusations. Emily, with her emotional and structured narrative, provided personal and detailed accounts of crucial moments. Nights of cold, hunger, and fear that Clarisse had soothed with courage and compassion. Ethan, closely observing the courtroom, highlighted patterns of manipulation, inconsistencies, and fallacies in the prosecutor's arguments, demonstrating how his narrative was based more on intent and bias than on concrete facts. The audience, including community members, journalists, and outside observers, began to grasp the reality of the case. Pierce's narrative, once powerful through its manipulation of perceptions and prejudices, began to crumble in the face of clear evidence, consistent testimony, and the defense's strategic presentation. Every detail reinforced Clarisse's integrity, humanity, and courage, transforming the collective perception of her. Pierce, feeling the impact of the defense's resistance, began pressing key witnesses, trying to elicit answers that might suggest wrongdoing. However, all were prepared to recount authentic and detailed experiences, highlighting the consistency, ethics, and positive impact of Clarisse's actions. Each defense intervention completely neutralized the prosecutor's attacks, making it clear that injustice could not stand in the face of the truth presented with clarity, strategy, and courage. During a strategic pause, Liam, Emily, and Ethan reviewed every detail of the next step. Liam focused on reinforcing the historical coherence of all Clarisse's actions, connecting documentary evidence to oral testimony. Emily crafted emotional narratives that could resonate with jurors and the audience without losing objectivity. Ethan analyzed Pierce's every move, anticipating potential flaws and manipulating the defense's responses to maintain a strategic advantage. Clarisse watched, inspired, recognizing the Caldwell's maturity and the effectiveness of their joint preparation. The climax of this phase approached. Pierce presented a historical document that, in isolation, could suggest Clarisse's misconduct. The tension was palpable. The defense responded in a coordinated manner. Liam contextualized the document, presenting additional evidence and detailed reports. Emily presented emotional accounts that reinforced her mother's integrity. Ethan analyzed the prosecutor's patterns and manipulative strategies, revealing inconsistencies and distorted intentions. The court finally began to recognize Pierce's manipulation and the strength of the defense. At this critical moment, Clarisse seized the opportunity to deliver a powerful message to the jurors and the audience. A statement about ethics, resilience, and the importance of truth, regardless of external pressures. She emphasized how her actions were always motivated by the well-being of others, demonstrating that kindness and courage can transform lives and overcome adversity. Each word reinforced her humanity, morality, and determination, creating a profound emotional impact. The media, following the case, began to convey the true narrative. Some sensationalist outlets still attempted to distort information, but many began to publish consistent and emotional accounts, highlighting the injustice Clarisse faced and the coherence of the defense's actions. Public perception began to align with the truth, increasing pressure on the court and the prosecutor to make decisions based on facts, not manipulation. And now, if you're following this exciting narrative and want to see how Clarisse and the Caldwells will face the final twists and turns, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue following this incredible fight for justice, courage, and redemption. The final confrontation in the courtroom began when Pierce, realizing his latest attempts at manipulation were being neutralized, resorted to more aggressive strategies. He pressured witnesses, tried to cast doubt on the defense's integrity, and exploited any nuance that might favor his narrative. Clarisse and the Caldwells, already seasoned after weeks of intense preparation, responded with precision, dismantling each argument and exposing the prosecutor's fallacies. Tensions reached fever pitch, and every move was decisive. During this phase, the defense presented a body of irrefutable evidence: historical documents, consistent testimony, community activity reports, and detailed records demonstrating Clarisse's integrity. Each element dismantled Pierce's attacks and reinforced the narrative of kindness, courage, and ethics. Emily presented accounts of personal and community transformation. Liam connected documentary evidence with testimony, and Ethan explained patterns of manipulation and legal fallacies, reinforcing the defense's transparency and coherence. The prosecutor, now visibly frustrated, attempted to use emotional pressure tactics and aggressive rhetoric, but Clarisse remained calm. Her firm and confident demeanor conveyed confidence, authenticity, and determination. The Caldwells continued to complement the defense with strategy and perfect coordination, demonstrating that preparation, unity, and ethics are powerful weapons against injustice. The audience and jurors, impacted by the evidence and the emotional narrative, began to reconsider their perceptions. Each consistent testimony, each contextualized piece of evidence, and each strategic analysis revealed the truth about Clarisse. She was not guilty of anything, but rather a woman who dedicated her life to transforming lives and offering opportunities where before there had been abandonment and despair. The courtroom was charged with tension. Each moment seemed to stretch time. Each look conveyed expectation and judgment. Clarisse, firm and serene, felt the weight of responsibility not only on herself, but on the entire life she had dedicated to the well-being of others. Jonathan Pierce, realizing that his latest attempts at manipulation were failing, intensified his aggressive stance. He used old documents, took testimonies out of context, and insinuated ethical lapses, trying to create enough doubt to shake the jurors' confidence. But Clarisse and the Caldwells were prepared. Years of strategic planning and family unity were culminating in this decisive moment. Liam presented a detailed report, connecting decades of Clarisse's actions to the positive impacts on the lives of the Caldwells and the community. Each graph, each timeline, dismantled the prosecutor's accusations, highlighting the coherence and integrity of Clarisse's actions. Emily, with her narrative skill, described detailed life experiences, nights of cold, hunger, and fear that Clarisse had soothed with compassion and courage. She highlighted how each selfless act had transformed lives and shaped characters, emphasizing that Clarisse never acted out of self-interest, but always for the collective good. Ethan, attentive to every reaction in the courtroom, analyzed patterns of manipulation, inconsistencies in the prosecutor's arguments, and strategic fallacies, showing how Pierce attempted to mislead through prejudice and bias. The audience began to sense the truth emerging. The prosecutor's manipulative narrative crumbled in the face of clear evidence, consistent testimony, and the defense's impeccable strategic presentation. Every detail reinforced Clarisse's integrity and courage, transforming public perception. The media, increasingly present, amplified the tension. Some outlets still sought sensationalism, but many began to highlight the injustice Clarisse faced, the protagonist's ethics and dedication, balancing the public narrative. The turning point came when Pierce presented an old document that, taken out of context, could suggest improper conduct. The tension in the courtroom was almost palpable. Clarisse calmly and clearly contextualized the document, explaining the sequence of events in detail. Liam presented graphic and chronological analyses that made any misinterpretation impossible, demonstrating coherence and integrity in each action. Emily reinforced the testimony with emotional accounts, contextualizing her mother's selfless acts. Ethan highlighted patterns of manipulation, dismantling the prosecutor's attempt to distort reality. Jurors and observers began to realize that Pierce based his accusation more on manipulation than concrete evidence. Each attack was neutralized, demonstrating that injustice could only be confronted with unity, strategy, courage, and ethics. Clarisse, maintaining a firm and dignified posture, conveyed authenticity and determination, inspiring not only the Caldwells, but also everyone present to reflect on justice, morality, and truth. The defense continued, presenting testimony detailing Clarisse's past actions and how she had positively impacted the community. Liam contextualized each document, demonstrating coherence and alignment with ethical principles. Emily presented accounts of life transformation, showing how Clarisse's kindness reverberated through the decades. Ethan analyzed the prosecutor's every move, exposing subtle manipulations, fallacies, and distorted intentions, reinforcing the defense's narrative. The prosecutor, now visibly under pressure, tried to emotionally destabilize Clarisse and the Caldwells, but the family's calm and strategy prevailed. The audience saw through the manipulation, and confidence in the defense grew significantly. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, and each strategic analysis gathered momentum, paving the way for the decisive phase of the trial. In one of the most moving moments, Emily recounted the night Clarisse found the Caldwell children, abandoned and in despair. She described the cold, fear, and hunger, but also the courage, compassion, and care Clarisse offered without thinking of herself. This detailed and vivid account deeply impacted the jury and audience, demonstrating that the protagonist's character and humanity were undeniable. Liam and Ethan elaborated, detailing each subsequent action, the positive impacts on the Caldwells' lives, and Clarisse's consistent conduct over the years. Each detail dismantled Pierce's accusations and revealed the truth clearly. Clarisse never acted with ill intent, always guided by ethics, kindness, and social responsibility. The climax approached. Pierce, aware that his narrative had been completely dismantled, made his final attempt to create doubt. However, the defense responded with surgical precision, using evidence, testimony, and strategic analysis to eliminate any shadow of uncertainty. The audience recognized Clarisse's integrity, and the jurors began to align themselves with the truth presented. And now, if you've been following this exciting story so far, click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the incredible ending, where justice, courage, and redemption meet, and the truth finally prevails. The courtroom teemed with tension, but the narrative took an unexpected turn when Liam, observing subtle details in prosecutor Pierce's behavior, noticed a crucial inconsistency in previous testimony. He discreetly signaled this to Emily and Ethan, and together they devised a strategic intervention that could turn the trial around. The prosecutor, confident and smug, failed to realize that every word spoken had been meticulously analyzed, recorded, and compared by the defense. Clarisse's calm and firm confidence conveyed reassurance not only to her family, but to everyone who recognized the injustice she had suffered. Emily was the first to speak, addressing the jurors directly but without overt emotion. She recounted how Clarisse, for years, had served as a beacon of hope in seemingly hopeless situations. Each story was unique, every detail carefully selected to demonstrate the consistency of her ethics and the humanity of her actions. There were no exaggerations, just facts and memories that constructed the image of a woman who truly transformed lives. Meanwhile, Ethan addressed the courtroom with a cool and precise analysis, pointing out contradictions in Pierce's arguments. He demonstrated that certain documents presented by the prosecutor had been manipulated or taken out of context, revealing clear intentions to distort the court's perception. Every technical detail was clearly explained, demonstrating not only the logical flaw, but also the bad faith behind each argument. Pierce began to feel himself losing control, but he still tried to maintain his dominant stance, pressuring the witnesses and attempting to induce doubt. The turning point came when Liam presented an old record, a letter written by a neighbor who had been with Clarisse and the Caldwells for decades. The document detailed Clarisse's compassion, her supportive actions, and the way she transformed the surrounding community. This irrefutable evidence began to shift the mood in the courtroom. Jurors and spectators felt the weight of the truth in the face of the prosecutor's manipulation. Pierce, realizing his core strategy had been compromised, became visibly nervous, searching for any remaining resource to salvage his narrative. Clarisse finally had her turn to speak. Without raising her voice, without dramatizing, she recounted moments from her life that revealed strength, sacrifice, and compassion. She told of the day she encountered the Caldwells, homeless children, and how she decided to take them in without hesitation, even though she had no resources. She recounted the years dedicated to the community, each intentional action, each silent effort unheard of. Each sentence carried the truth of a lifetime, built with courage and empathy, without the need for dramatic defense. The breaking point came when Ethan revealed a pattern of prosecutorial behavior that had gone unnoticed. Pierce had repeatedly pressured witnesses and manipulated evidence in other similar cases, building a history of unethical practices. This revelation left the courtroom silent, while the prosecutor's credibility began to crumble. Jurors began to realize they were not just judging Clarisse, but also confronting the corruption and unbridled ambition that had threatened to destroy innocent lives. Emily, realizing the impact of the revelation, made a final appeal to the jurors. The decision was not just about one woman, but about principles of justice, truth, and humanity. Liam presented summary charts, connecting each piece of evidence and testimony in a logical and unquestionable way, demonstrating that Clarisse's every action followed ethical and consistent standards. The defense had constructed a mosaic of evidence, testimony, and emotional narrative that could not be denied or ignored. Pierce, now visibly defeated, attempted to launch one final accusation, but the evidence was lacking. His position had become untenable. The judge, attentive to each argument, weighed the defense's presentation, acknowledging the clarity, consistency, and strength of the evidence. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, aware that this moment would define not only Clarisse's freedom, but also the historical truth about her life and legacy. And then, finally, the judge announced the decision. Clarisse was innocent of all charges. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of emotion, relief, and recognition. Jurors, witnesses, and even community members felt the weight of the injustice that had been righted. The Caldwells rushed to hug their mother, tears streaming, smiles lighting up, faces that held decades of hope, patience, and resilience. The impact of the trial reverberated beyond the courtroom. The media began reporting the story ethically and in detail, highlighting not only the injustice faced, but also the courage, strategy, and humanity of Clarisse and her family. The narrative became a symbol of resistance against manipulation, prejudice, and corruption, inspiring the community and encouraging reflection on ethics, justice, and solidarity. After Clarisse's acquittal, the courtroom slowly emptied, but the energy of the moment still lingered in the air. For the Caldwell family, nothing would ever be the same. Years of tension, fear, and struggle culminated in that moment of justice and relief. Clarisse still felt the effects of the pressure, but now it was different. For the first time in decades, she could breathe without the weight of injustice on her shoulders. Liam, Emily, and Ethan stood by her side, each feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and responsibility. They knew Clarisse's story didn't end there. The world needed to know the truth, and they would be the bearers of that narrative. In the days following the trial, the press began to cover the story in greater depth. Many journalists visited Clarisse's and the Caldwells' homes, seeking detailed accounts that could further humanize the events. Emily, always articulate, participated in several interviews, explaining not only the legal process, but also Clarisse's years of dedication to the community and the children she had fostered. Liam worked in parallel, providing documents, graphs, and detailed records to support each narrative, and Ethan ensured that all information was presented clearly, impartially, and strategically, avoiding distortion or misinterpretation. Clarisse, though emotionally exhausted, began to reflect on her next steps. She knew her story could become a symbol of hope and resilience, but she also understood that she needed time to reconnect with her own life. For years, she had dedicated herself to protecting others, and now she had the chance to reclaim spaces she had lost. Old friendships, relationships with neighbors, and even small everyday pleasures that prison life had robbed her of. The Caldwells met daily to plan not only their family life, but also initiatives that could transform the narrative of injustice into concrete actions of community support. The first step was to establish a foundation to support vulnerable children and families inspired by Clarisse's principles. Liam coordinated the administrative and legal aspects, Emily handled communications and community outreach, while Ethan structured social programs and engagement strategies. Clarisse, with her experience and vision, guided each action, ensuring that the Foundation's mission reflected the values she had always championed: compassion, responsibility, education, and opportunity. The Foundation quickly became a local reference, attracting volunteers, donations, and partnerships with schools and social organizations. Meanwhile, the Caldwell family decided to get involved in education and social advocacy projects, leveraging the experience gained during the legal battle. Ethan began organizing lectures on legal manipulation, social justice, and ethics, addressing how systems often fail to protect the most vulnerable. Emily wrote articles and participated in community programs, sharing stories of resilience and inspiration. Liam, in turn, became a mentor to young lawyers, demonstrating how preparation, strategy, and ethical principles can change lives. Each action the family took reinforced Clarisse's image, transforming the injustice she faced into a learning experience and opportunity for others. In parallel, the community surrounding Clarisse's former residence began to reorganize. People who had previously observed passively began to engage in collective projects, inspired by the story of the woman who had saved lives and courageously faced injustice. The social choir, which had previously remained divided between silence and complicity, became active, participating in volunteer programs, cultural events, and awareness campaigns. Clarisse, observing this transformation, realized that her impact had multiplied exponentially. A life dedicated to caring for others generated waves of change that reached ever more people. During this period, the family also sought to reconcile old relationships that had been affected by the trial. Friends who had drifted apart due to rumors or social pressure reconnected, some with apologies, others simply with the desire to reconnect. Clarisse, demonstrating generosity and maturity, welcomed everyone with dignity, transforming old resentments into opportunities for rebuilding. This reconciliation not only strengthened family ties, but also reinforced the story's central message. Justice, when achieved, can bring not only relief, but also social and emotional healing. Meanwhile, Jonathan Pierce disappeared from the media spotlight. His career suffered irreversible damage, and his manipulative behavior was publicly questioned. The court, after analyzing the patterns of behavior revealed during Clarisse's trial, began implementing internal changes to prevent future abuse, inspired by the flaws exposed during the proceedings. Ethan, mindful of the legal repercussions, documented every step of these changes, creating a record that would serve as a reference for future generations. Liam and Emily closely monitored the situation, ensuring that every measure adopted reflected the principles of justice and integrity that had always guided the family. Clarisse, despite all her external victories, dedicated time to self-care and reflection. She wrote in her journal, recording memories of past moments and observations of the transformation occurring around her. Each page reflected maturity, learning, and hope. The Caldwells, observing their mother, were proud, not only of the acquittal, but of the strength and resilience Clarisse demonstrated, demonstrating that facing injustice with ethics and courage could generate profound and lasting change. The impact of Clarisse's story began to spread beyond the city. Other communities and social organizations began seeking guidance, reporting cases of injustice and requesting support to confront systems that neglect the most vulnerable. The foundation created by the family expanded, incorporating new projects and attracting professionals committed to ethics, education, and social development. Clarisse, although no longer at the center of the action, continued to guide strategies and decisions, ensuring that the essence of its mission remained intact. Amidst all this transformation, the Caldwells realized that true victory lay not only in acquittal, but in the ability to transform pain and injustice into positive action. Every social project, every story shared, every life impacted was a reflection of Clarisse's courage and determination, amplifying her legacy and cementing her position as a symbol of resilience, justice, and hope. In the months following Clarisse's acquittal, the foundation she and the Caldwells created began to take shape and gain recognition. Each project was carefully structured to provide direct support to vulnerable families, focusing on education, healthcare, and employment opportunities. Liam took on administrative leadership, ensuring all operations were transparent and efficient. Emily coordinated communications, engaging the community and increasing the visibility of the initiatives. Ethan, in turn, structured mentoring programs, cultural activities, and educational workshops, ensuring that each initiative generated concrete and measurable impact. Clarisse began to act more strategically, offering guidance based on decades of experience. Her presence was not merely symbolic. Every decision she helped make reflected principles of ethics, compassion, and social justice. The Caldwells began to realize that Clarisse's true leadership lay in her ability to inspire action and cultivate collective responsibility. The children served by the foundation began to excel academically, and reports of social transformation began to arrive from across the city. Each success story cemented the importance of the foundation's work and reinforced the narrative of resilience and hope that Clarisse represented. The community, once passive, was now actively engaged. Residents, who had previously observed in silence or with suspicion, began contributing through donations, volunteering, and participating in cultural and educational events. The social choir, which had previously been divided between silence and complicity, became active, organizing performances, raising funds, and promoting social integration initiatives. Clarisse observed this transformation with satisfaction, realizing that the influence of her actions multiplied through coordinated efforts and collective engagement. Meanwhile, old wounds began to heal. Friends and neighbors who had drifted apart due to the trial and previous rumors began to reconnect. Many sought to apologize, others simply wanted to participate constructively in the initiatives. Clarisse received each gesture with serenity and generosity, demonstrating that her ability to forgive and reconnect people was as important as her strength in the face of injustice. These reunions strengthened community bonds and demonstrated that justice and reconciliation can go hand in hand, creating a solid foundation for a more cohesive and humane future. The foundation's impact quickly spread beyond the city. Educational institutions and social organizations from other regions began seeking partnerships and guidance, interested in replicating the Caldwells model. Each expanded project created opportunities for young people and families, reinforcing Clarisse's mission and the importance of transforming experiences of injustice into social action. Liam, Emily, and Ethan worked to solidify a support network, structuring monitoring and results measurement protocols, ensuring that each initiative had a real and sustainable impact. Meanwhile, the Caldwells engaged in social justice awareness campaigns, highlighting how systems often neglect the most vulnerable. Ethan began giving lectures and workshops, addressing legal strategies, ethics, and judicial manipulation. Emily wrote articles and participated in community outreach programs, conveying messages of resilience and transformation. Liam, with his administrative and strategic experience, supported new organizations and mentored young leaders, sharing lessons learned during the fight for Clarisse's acquittal. Together, they expanded their mother's legacy, demonstrating that justice and social action can go hand in hand. As the foundation expanded, Clarisse also sought to reclaim personal aspects of her life that had been neglected during the war. Years of legal battle. She reconnected with old friends, resumed hobbies that brought her joy, and dedicated time to herself, balancing social action with personal well-being. This rebuilding phase not only strengthened her emotional health, but also served as an example to everyone around her, demonstrating that leadership and caring for others need not come at the expense of one's own well-being. Clarisse and the Foundation's notoriety brought opportunities for even greater impact. Educational. Institutions began inviting her to lectures and conferences, while social organizations sought guidance on how to implement sustainable and ethical projects. Each invitation was an opportunity to share her story, inspiring young people, community leaders, and citizens to believe in the power of resilience, ethics, and compassion. Clarisse's narrative, once marked by injustice and suffering, now became a tangible example of resilience and social transformation. Furthermore, the Caldwells continued to strengthen the community support network. New programs were implemented, ranging from scholarships to cultural workshops and professional mentoring. Young people served by the Foundation began to act as multipliers, passing on the lessons and values they had acquired to their peers and family members. Each action reinforced the positive impact and created a cycle of solidarity and social development, solidifying Clarisse's vision as a catalyst for change in the city and beyond. The following months, Clarisse and the Caldwells Foundation reached a point of maturity and recognition that surpassed all initial expectations. Each initiative now had its own structure: youth education programs, cultural workshops, and vocational courses, all strategically coordinated by Liam and Ethan. Emily, focused on communication and social engagement, created campaigns that demonstrated concrete results, highlighting stories of transformation of young people who, thanks to the Foundation, found opportunities that previously seemed unattainable. Clarisse, observing every step, assumed the role of mentor and advisor, ensuring that each action reflected her values of ethics, compassion, and social responsibility. The Foundation's impact began to resonate throughout the city. Schools, community organizations, and youth groups began to collaborate, inspired by Clarisse's example and the success of the Caldwell family's initiatives. Each project expanded not only the Foundation's presence, but also the community's awareness of the importance of mutual support, solidarity, and social responsibility. Young people benefiting from the initiatives became multipliers of knowledge and hope, sharing their learning and encouraging their peers to pursue positive paths. Meanwhile, Clarisse began personally visiting different neighborhoods, listening to stories of challenges and needs, and adapting programs to each community's needs. Her physical presence, combined with her family's strategic leadership, solidified the Foundation as a local and national reference. Each visit revealed stories of overcoming obstacles, but also reminded everyone of the importance of acting ethically and fairly, transforming experiences of adversity into learning and social action. The Caldwells, realizing the need to document and share this legacy, decided to create a series of audio-visual recordings about the Foundation's impact. Liam handled logistics and organization. Emily oversaw storytelling and communication, while Ethan analyzed data and results, ensuring each piece of information was clear, measurable, and inspiring. Clarisse participated in testimonials, showcasing not only their past actions but also their vision for the future, encouraging young people to believe in the capacity for transformation through ethical commitment and solidarity. Clarisse's story began to attract attention beyond the city. Educational institutions, social organizations, and even local authorities invited the Foundation to share successful methods and community engagement strategies. Each lecture and presentation reinforced not only the importance of justice and ethics, but also the power of consistent, targeted human actions towards social causes. Clarisse's legacy, once threatened by injustice and manipulation, became a tangible example of resilience and positive impact. As the social work progressed, moments of reconciliation and emotional closure also emerged for the supporting characters. Friends, neighbors, and former acquaintances who had drifted apart during the trial reconnected, collaborating on initiatives and participating in community activities. Clarisse, with serenity and wisdom, guided these reunions so that old resentments were transformed into opportunities for cooperation and collective learning. The community, previously divided, began to function as a support network, inspired by the protagonist's ethics and dedication. Public recognition came naturally. Reports, articles, and documentaries began to showcase not only Clarisse's story of injustice, but also the transformative impact of her foundation and the active participation of the Caldwell family. Each narrative cemented Clarisse's image as a symbol of resilience, courage, and compassion, highlighting that confronting injustice ethically and strategically can generate profound and lasting change. Amidst all this, the Caldwells realized that true victory lay not only in the acquittal, but in the ability to create a sustainable legacy. Each foundation project, each story of transformation, each young person benefited, represented a continuous victory, amplifying the message that justice, when accompanied by action and ethics, generates concrete impacts. Clarisse, although no longer at the center of all operations, continued to guide and inspire, ensuring that their mission remained alive and relevant. The Foundation's expansion brought new opportunities for innovation. New programs were developed, focusing on technological skills, entrepreneurship, and personal development. Young people served became mentors to others, creating a virtuous cycle of learning and solidarity. The Foundation began to serve as a model for other cities, proving that a well-organized structure, guided by ethical principles and human dedication, could generate significant and replicable transformations. And if you've been following this inspiring journey of courage, justice, and social transformation, click the like button and subscribe to the channel to continue watching Clarisse and the Caldwells expand their legacy, showing that determination and ethics can change lives and entire communities. As the months passed, Clarisse and the Caldwells Foundation established itself as a true engine of social transformation. Each project had clear objectives: education, culture, social inclusion, and skills development for vulnerable youth and families. Liam coordinated all administrative aspects, ensuring that resources, reports, and data were organized transparently and strategically. Emily dedicated herself to communication and community engagement, developing campaigns that showcased the real impact of the actions, humanizing the Foundation's history, and inspiring more and more people to participate. Ethan, with his analytical and detail-oriented eye, structured mentoring programs, workshops, and cultural activities, ensuring that each initiative generated concrete, measurable, and lasting results. Clarisse, though exhausted after years of legal battles and constant pressure, found strength in the positive impact she saw multiplying around her. She began to act as a strategic mentor, guiding important decisions and ensuring that each project reflected the values of ethics, justice, and compassion that had always guided her life. The children who had been served by the Caldwells during the Foundation's initial phase began to excel academically, demonstrating that investment, care, and targeted opportunities made a real difference in each individual's life trajectory. Each story of overcoming obstacles served to strengthen the team's motivation and reaffirm that all the previous effort had been worthwhile. Meanwhile, the community surrounding Clarisse's former residence underwent a significant transformation. Residents who had previously remained silent or wary began actively engaging in social initiatives. The DI social choir, which had once passively observed the events, became a protagonist, organizing performances, cultural events, and fundraising campaigns to support the Foundation's programs. Clarisse observed this evolution with quiet pride, realizing that the power of her mission was not limited to her physical presence, but spread through collaboration and collective engagement. The Foundation not only grew in size, but also in impact and social relevance. Educational institutions, support, organizations, and even government agencies began seeking partnerships, interested in replicating the model developed by the Caldwells. Each implemented project yielded concrete results. Young people received professional mentoring, cultural workshops, and educational programs, while families found support with basic issues, guidance, and access to opportunities that were previously inaccessible. Clarisse, following everything closely, saw how her story of struggle and resilience was becoming a living legacy, capable of inspiring consistent and lasting change. Meanwhile, the Caldwell family engaged in awareness-raising and social advocacy activities, sharing their experience of overcoming challenges with other communities and organizations. Ethan began giving lectures on judicial manipulation, ethics, and social justice, demonstrating how confronting often flawed systems requires courage, preparation, and strategy. Emily wrote articles and participated in community programs, highlighting the power of resilience, compassion, and ethical action. Liam served as a mentor to young leaders and entrepreneurs, imparting lessons in management, strategy, and social planning. Each family member solidified their role, becoming a multiplier of Clarisse's legacy and strengthening the Foundation's collective impact. As her social work progressed, Clarisse's own life began to reorganize. She resumed hobbies and practices she had neglected during her years of tension and imprisonment. She reconnected with old friends, some of whom had been estranged for decades, and re-established important bonds. Each reunion provided healing, emotional closure, and opportunities for collaboration with the Foundation. Clarisse demonstrated in practice that leadership, ethics, and dedication to others depend not only on intense effort, but also on personal balance and constant reflection. Public recognition intensified. Clarisse's story, previously marked by injustice and persecution, began to be celebrated as an example of resilience, and social impact. Reports, documentaries, and special features highlighted not only the acquittal, but also the Foundation's development and active community involvement. Each narrative reinforced that ethical struggle and consistent dedication can generate real transformation, inspiring new generations to believe in the power of collective action and the importance of solid human values. As the Foundation grew, new initiatives were implemented, focusing on technology, entrepreneurship, and professional training. Young people served, became mentors to others, creating a virtuous cycle of learning and solidarity. Digital inclusion programs, cultural workshops, and youth leadership initiatives allowed more people to participate and develop, solidifying the Foundation as a national benchmark. Clarisse, observing the results, realized that each action aligned with the mission she had always championed, transforming experiences of adversity into opportunities for growth and lasting social impact. Furthermore, Clarisse's personal story served as an example for advocacy and public policy initiatives. Several organizations sought collaboration. Learning from the strategic and ethical way the Foundation tackled complex social challenges. Liam, Emily, and Ethan documented every action and outcome, creating records that would serve as a guide for future generations. Each report and impact analysis reinforced the importance of planning, strategy, and ethics as essential pillars for transforming injustice into opportunity. And at that point, Clarisse and the Caldwells realized that true victory lay not only in judicial acquittal, but in the ability to create a sustainable and transformative legacy. Each project, each success story, each young person impacted represented a living chapter in the narrative of courage, resilience, and ethical action she had built. Clarisse became a symbol of hope and inspiration, showing that confronting injustice with firmness, strategy, and compassion can generate lasting results, not just for one person, but for an entire community. The year following the Foundation's consolidation brought unprecedented challenges, but also significant opportunities. Clarisse, accompanied by Liam, Emily, and Ethan, realized that the structure they had built allowed them to expand their actions beyond the city, reaching neighboring communities facing similar social vulnerability issues. Each program developed was replicated with local adaptations, maintaining the Foundation's core values: education, professional training, social inclusion, and cultural development. Liam took on the responsibility of coordinating partnerships, ensuring that each expansion was structured and sustainable. Emily developed regional communication strategies, promoting engagement, visibility, and awareness. Ethan organized training for volunteers, ensuring that the Foundation's values were consistently communicated and applied in each location. Clarisse remained a moral and strategic guide. Her life experience, marked by adversity, injustice, and resilience, began to inspire not only the team, but also the communities it served. She held regular meetings, listening to stories from the children and families she served, identifying challenges and opportunities for improvement. Each visit provided mutual learning. As Clarisse provided guidance and inspiration, she received feedback that allowed her to refine programs, making them more inclusive and effective. Stories of overcoming challenges multiplied, transforming the Foundation's legacy into a national benchmark for structured and ethical social actions. As the expansion progressed, the Caldwells also faced the need to integrate new staff, volunteers, and local leaders. Ethan organized detailed training sessions focused not only on execution, but also on ethical and strategic principles. Emily created educational materials and communication guides to standardize the Foundation's narrative and ensure that each action was communicated clearly, inspiringly, and transparently. Liam, responsible for logistics, ensured that resources were distributed efficiently and sustainably, avoiding waste and strengthening the Foundation's credibility. At the same time, Clarisse began developing specific programs for young people at risk of school and social exclusion. She implemented practical skills, workshops, career guidance, and individualized support, creating real opportunities for personal transformation. Each young person received emotional, academic, and professional support, strengthening self-esteem, discipline, and future prospects. Stories began to circulate in local and national media, demonstrating the power of coordinated, ethical, and committed action to achieve real results. The social impact also began to reverberate in the political and institutional spheres. Municipal and regional authorities began supporting the Foundation's initiatives, recognizing the value of structured community development programs. Maintaining an ethical and impartial stance, Clarisse was invited to participate in committees and councils focused on social policy, always guiding decisions based on the practical experience gained over decades of social work. Each participation amplified the Foundation's voice, demonstrating that concrete and ethical actions can influence public policy and generate systemic change. Meanwhile, the Caldwell family continued to cement internal ties and strengthen the Foundation's structure. Liam focused on long-term strategic planning, Emily on communication and engagement, and Ethan on training programs and impact monitoring. Clarisse, in turn, acted as a mentor and advisor, guiding critical decisions and inspiring the team to maintain coherence, ethics, and a broad social vision. Their collaborative work consolidated not only the Foundation, but also the family's strength as an agent of change and an ethical benchmark. Moments of celebration began to emerge naturally. Cultural events, artistic performances, and award ceremonies highlighted the individual and collective achievements of young people served by the Foundation. Each event demonstrated that social transformation was possible when combined with strategy, dedication, and solid values. Clarisse, moved, realized that each young person impacted represented not only a personal victory, but also the continuation of her legacy of compassion, courage, and resilience. Additionally, the Caldwells initiated documentation and historical record-keeping projects for the Foundation. Ethan compiled data on the results of each program, Liam structured impact reports, and Emily oversaw the narrative, ensuring each story was told authentically and inspiringly. Clarisse actively participated, reviewing content and providing historical perspective, ensuring the legacy was recorded for future generations. This documentation work solidified the Foundation not only as a social action, but also as a benchmark for ethical and strategic impact at the national level. As the Foundation grew, Clarisse also dedicated herself to strengthening the community emotionally. She promoted dialogue meetings between families, young people, and local leaders, addressing topics such as empathy, conflict resolution, cooperation, and citizenship. Each meeting encouraged active participation, reflection, and the strengthening of social bonds. The city began to realize that the Foundation's work not only provided material support, but also promoted a culture of solidarity, ethics, and collective responsibility. The Foundation's public and media recognition reached new heights. Reports in newspapers, magazines, and television programs highlighted the impact of its initiatives, revealing stories of transformation and success. Clarisse, always discreet and ethical, used every opportunity to emphasize that the Foundation's work depended on collaboration, strategic planning, and a commitment to solid human values. Young beneficiaries shared stories of change, solidifying the narrative that it is possible to transform injustice and adversity into a lasting legacy. At the same time, challenges naturally arose. Logistical, financial, and social issues needed to be resolved strategically and creatively. Liam, Emily, and Ethan worked together to overcome obstacles, always with Clarisse's guidance. Each problem solved strengthened the Foundation and cemented the trust of the community and partners. Success was measured not only by numbers, but by the real impact on people's lives. Young people enrolled, families served, opportunities created, and perspectives transformed. The Foundation's final year of intense work marked the culmination of Clarisse and the Caldwells' journey. Each program had consolidated, and the social impact was already extending beyond the city's borders, reaching neighboring regions and inspiring similar initiatives across the country. The Foundation's core operated like a well-oiled machine. Liam handled administration, ensuring financial sustainability and strategic expansion. Emily coordinated communications and engagement, connecting media, volunteers, and the community. Ethan oversaw educational and training programs, ensuring that each action generated concrete and measurable results. Clarisse, though increasingly selective in her active participation, remained the guiding force, mentoring critical decisions and inspiring everyone around her with her vision of justice, ethics, and compassion. The Foundation's educational projects reached their peak. Young people in vulnerable situations began to occupy leadership positions, creating their own programs and workshops with the Foundation's support. Many of those who had been served since childhood became mentors to others, completing a virtuous cycle of solidarity, learning, and social transformation. Clarisse observed each progress with emotion, aware that the fruits of years of dedication and struggle were finally blossoming. Each story of overcoming adversity was not only the result of strategic planning, but also of empathy, trust, and humanization of actions. At the same time, the Foundation organized a large community celebration and recognition event. Hundreds of people attended, including young people served, family members, partners, volunteers, and members of the press. During the ceremony, moving stories were shared. Young people who had overcome risky situations, families who had found stability, community leaders who were inspired to create their own projects. Each story highlighted the power of ethical action and genuine care, reinforcing the importance of Clarisse and the Caldwell family's legacy. The emotion was palpable. Tears and smiles mingled in an atmosphere charged with recognition, gratitude, and hope. The culmination of the journey came when the foundation was invited to present its results at a national conference on social justice and community development. Clarisse, with her calm and authoritative presence, took the stage and shared her life experience, from years of injustice and imprisonment to the foundation's establishment. She emphasized that each challenge she faced not only shaped her resilience but also enabled her to create a structure capable of transforming the lives of hundreds of people. Her narrative emphasized that justice, ethics, and compassion are forces capable of generating lasting change when combined with consistent and strategic action. The Caldwells participated in the presentation, each demonstrating their role in the foundation's development and direct impact in different areas. Liam detailed its administration and expansion, Emily presented communication and community engagement strategies, and Ethan demonstrated metrics and concrete results from educational and social programs. The audience was impressed by the organization, planning, and human impact of each initiative, recognizing that the foundation's work was not only efficient, but also profoundly transformative. The event cemented Clarisse and her family's reputation as national leaders in social action, ethics, and community development. Upon returning to the city, the foundation continued to expand its activities, but this time with a focus on long-term sustainability. New projects were implemented involving technology, social innovation, and youth entrepreneurship. Each program aimed not only to provide immediate support, but also to create opportunities for continued growth, preparing young people and families to face future challenges with autonomy and confidence. Clarisse, more strategic than ever, oversaw each initiative, ensuring that core values of justice, ethics, and compassion remained intact, even as the foundation grew exponentially. Closing emotional rifts also became a priority during this period. Clarisse reconnected with old friends and neighbors, promoting meetings for reconciliation, dialogue, and community strengthening. Old resentments were transformed into cooperation and partnership, demonstrating that overcoming injustices isn't limited to legal victory, but also involves emotional healing and building stronger relationships. The now united community became an active part of the foundation, contributing volunteers, resources, and ongoing engagement, cementing an environment of collaboration and solidarity. Moments of celebration multiplied throughout the year. Cultural events, artistic performances, and recognition ceremonies showcased individual and collective achievements. Award-winning youth, families served, and community leaders shared moving stories of transformation. Each event reinforced the message that social justice, combined with strategic and ethical action, generates concrete and lasting impacts. Clarisse, with her steady and serene gaze, watched it all, feeling proud not only of the foundation, but also of the multiplier effect its actions were having on the lives of so many people. The foundation's expansion also included partnerships with other cities and states, replicating projects and methodologies adapted to local realities. Each expansion was carefully planned to ensure that the essence of the foundation's work, ethics, compassion, and justice, was preserved. Liam, Emily, and Ethan coordinated every detail, ensuring consistent results and tangible social impact. Clarisse, as always, served as a strategic advisor, imparting experience and insight, and ensuring that every decision reflected the principles that had guided the foundation from its inception. At the height of this period, the foundation received national public recognition. Educational institutions, government agencies, and social organizations formally recognized the impact of the initiatives. Clarisse was invited to participate in panels, conferences, and social leadership programs highlighting the importance of ethics, compassion, and strategic action. The trajectory of injustice that marked her in the past became a symbol of resilience, courage, and social transformation, inspiring young people, community leaders, and society as a whole to believe in the power of human action guided by solid values. The emotional conclusion came when Clarisse gathered the entire foundation team and the young beneficiaries for an internal ceremony. There, each young person shared their achievements. Each team member recounted the impact of their actions, and Clarisse, moved, offered words of inspiration and gratitude. She emphasized that the true victory was not just the absolution she received years earlier, but the ability to transform injustice and adversity into opportunities for change, education, and human development. The room was charged with emotion, recognition, and hope for the future. And, if you've followed this journey of courage, resilience, and social transformation, be sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel to be inspired by real stories of impact and follow other accounts of overcoming challenges, ethics, and humanity. Thus, the story of Clarisse and the Caldwell family reached its final climax, from injustice and persecution to the consolidation of a transformative legacy, capable of touching hundreds of lives, transforming communities, and inspiring generations. Every action, every decision, every ethical and strategic effort demonstrated that the fight against injustice, when guided by compassion, planning, and courage, can generate a profound and lasting impact, solidifying a narrative of hope, justice, and humanity.